Hi, I'm Chadillac. This is the Cage Rage Podcast, and we're talking Tito and Chuckhole.
I'm Miguel. Glad to be here on the Cage Rage Podcast, Tito Chuck 3 edition.
Hey, this is Chadillac, and you're here with the Cage Rage Podcast. We're talking Chuckhole and Tito 3 today. This is the post-fight. Oh my God. It's an embarrassment to even have to talk about it. But, you know, we spent a lot of time talking about it, so we do have to wrap it up. First of all, I want to say I'm sorry. We're still going through all of those videos, downloading them. We have the video. We just have so many to do, and if you've ever had to download ancient pieces of video, then you know what it's like to download video, upload video, stream it, get it to clear it up, clean it, put it onto everything. So I apologize. It's all on me. It will be there eventually, and if you subscribe to the little button below that says subscribe, it's the little red button on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button and you'll be able to go and you'll be able to watch that video among many, 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 many others. There will be, I don't know, Aaron, how many fights are on there? 1,000 probably? I don't have any idea. Literally, I have no idea. Fights dating back as early as probably 95 anyway. I mean, ancient fights, fights in car lots and crazy stuff. So anyways, Tito and Chuckhole. Good God. So Dana's talking all kinds of crazy stuff about, what do you call him, Oscar de la Dumbass, and he's mad as hell about it. He probably has the right to be to some degree, because Oscar and Tito were not very kind to the UFC. They made mention that if you want to be paid properly, blah, blah, blah. None of the numbers have come out as of yet about pay-per-view, unless they have today and I missed it. Have you heard about pay-per-view yet, Miguel?
No, it's too early, and you know, there's reruns and stuff that are still being bought, so the final number's a couple of weeks away. Bottom line to me is, you know, yeah, you had a couple of fighters there. You know, Dana came out and he insulted Oscar de la Hoya, the promoter, and they've gone back and forth and things. And here's the thing to me is, again, it goes back to the original podcast we did on this fight pre-fight. It's like, is this fight good for the sport? And I think Dana sits back and recognizes that it's not. So he starts with that, like, being right, you know? But he should just basically keep his mouth shut and let other people, you know, fall flat on their faces. Because, I mean, Oscar, call me, brother, because this was just a bad idea from the beginning. It played out badly on tape, and that's the bad part, you know. I mean, I say tape, you know, facetiously now, but it played out badly live, you know what I mean? Chuck looked like, you know, a grandfatherly version of himself, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad.
And, you know, Tito kind of did the right thing in that, you know, he had a little more left in the tank. And when you've got an advantage, you kind of, you know, he didn't allow the fight to drag on. I guess that's the best thing you could say about it.
Yeah.
And I think they were there to try to perform, but you're just nowhere near at the level of 10 years ago. And I don't know why. Here's the part where Oscar really does have, you know, he's a boxer his whole career, right? So he's got that competitor's, you know, adrenaline that kicks in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and you know, at the end, he's young enough. He's about 43, right? So
yeah.
He's right in there. So if these guys can compete, so can he. I hope, you know, that he's mentioned it on several occasions, you know. A fight with him and Mayweather might even attract an audience, you know, at some point.
I believe that definitely would.
And so Oscar still has that kind of, that part of it is a little bit of delusion, I think. You know, I think he should, you know, it would be better if he sort of comfortably moved on to the role of a promoter and maker of stars and stuff like that, and didn't dwell on that aspect for himself, you know. That's part of what I think Dana says, you know, he can be embarrassing sometimes. When he presents himself with the media and stuff like that. We have had Oscar, hyped up at a press conference, showing off his six-pack and stuff. And, we saw with Chuck, six-pack isn't indicating to any way, shape, or form that you're back in fighting shape. You know what I mean? So it's interesting to me there is that, but Dana should keep his mouth shut. But Oscar, if you really want to stay in MMA, you need a strategy. You need something beyond a flash in the pan show with questionable name recognition from another company where you really don't have any of the hype and stuff.
Hey,
it's like if you're really going to be in the sport, that wasn't the right way to delve in it. I think they're going to get killed. Tito was in the media, and Tito was being, I think, pretty reasonable in terms of apparently the pay-per-views in the UFC. The way I think the pay-per-views work is, if you sell a certain number of pay-per-views, you start getting paid, per pay-per-view. You sell over 1 million, they give you $2 or $3. They bump up the per pay-per-view and stuff. So with Oscar and what boxing does is they start the revenue showing on the pay-per-views from the beginning. So it's not like the first 300,000 you don't get a bonus or whatever.
Right.
So they started from the beginning. So Tito was being reasonable, saying he's hoping that he made 200,000 pay-per-views. And I think that's about the top end of what could be hoped for. If they sold 1.3 million, Tito and Chuck are both going to be going to the bank with a considerable payday. But
I looked up Chuck's current net worth prior to this, and it said that he was worth $14 million. I don't know, what the actual reality of that is, whether that's true or not. It's just a Wikipedia thing, but at $14 million,
what they do is they add up the known salaries he's made in his MMA career. And that's your total.
I mean, I know that's not a reality, but nonetheless, at $14 million, let's say he's not worth $14 million, but he's got to be worth something like, he's got to have around, $3 or $4 million kind of laying around, and with assets and things like that, he could probably liquidate and still be somewhere around 6 to 8. You know what I mean? And is he really that desperate for money?
Yeah, I don't know that we know any of that. The bottom line
is fair enough.
14 million isn't 14 million, in terms of like what you think versus what you actually
I know that,
get.
But I'm just saying he can't be that desperate.
No,
maybe he is. I don't know. What do I know?
Let me put it this way. So he had 14 million in 2010 when he left the UFC. That's if he put away every cent. That's what I mean is he probably winds up with 9 million after he pays off trainers and this and that and the other stuff, right? So he's got some expense at the end of the day, nutrition and things like that. He was investing in himself too, but there were expenditures and stuff. So figure he's got maybe 9 million operating. He buys a house, lives the lifestyle a little bit, has a car, hopefully still has his house and his car and stuff. Maybe he has some money in the bank, but I think, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, you got the potential to make 5 million now, I think he's got to listen. I don't think he can
he's got to take that if he can. And he's looking at a guy who he's already knocked out 2 times. He's not afraid of it all. And I believe in Chuck's mind, he did not have any idea that Tito was going to knock him out. I don't think in his mind that conceptually that could even happen. I don't think he had any clue that was going to be the case.
I go back to this. I can't blame Chuck. I can't blame Tito. Now the promotion, I don't know what they were pursuing here, because the promotion, like I said, I don't think there was a huge call for this third fight. I think Oscar in his mind, remembers the first fights, and it was around the time he was retiring, and it was around the time a lot of people were looking at pay-per-view numbers, and the UFC was starting to do real numbers and stuff like that. So, maybe they made an impact on him. But to produce them, another edition of it 10 years later seemed, a lot of people were like, really? What was that from? And you can't blame the fighters. And they came out and did the same performance, the same script. They don't like each other. They talk the game. I don't think there's, too much that they could. It's weird to see them promote the fight and not be able to show the video of the first fights or any of that, And the UFC allowed this to happen. They could have made it not happen. I can't believe that Chuck, with one phone call from Dana, that Chuck wouldn't have been given some money or something and sit aside, and all that stuff about being altruistic for the other fighters, that's all a nice additional thing. But at the end of the day, Chuck, was going to do what's good for Chuck, and I think he needed, the payday seemed good, and I think he didn't see in his mind that he could perform so poorly. But,
I agree.
It's funny, and I know, I say I don't want to be disrespectful, then I say this, but I think, we've all seen everything. It's a YouTube world, right? We've all seen, there's a video that went viral and millions of people have seen it it's an older white guy that is on a bus and he's being made fun of verbally by a younger black guy. And at some point, the young guy kind of goes too far, is in his face. The other guy gets up and delivers a combo that puts the other dude on Queer Street. And the other people in the audience are like, the people taping and stuff in the bus are like, oh shit. The white guy gets off the bus and he's like, but it was like, hey, that old guy still had something. It turns out, he was in his 60s or whatever. And it's like, that guy had more left than Chuck. And that's,
right.
Just that came to mind while watching the fight. That's what I was like, ooh, this reminds me, that's not good. That's not good for the promotion. It's not good for the sport. Like I asked.
Yeah.
Like you should kind of ask that question before you get into promoting and stuff like that. Is it going to be good for the overall sport? Now that tends to be like good for Dana too, and that sucks because Dana's in that position. You may want to be legit competition to them, but Oscar, if that's what you want to be, legit competition in MMA, you're going about it all wrong, man.
So look, here's the deal. We know people, but hey, Oscar, get the right people involved. Get people behind you who know what they're doing, instead of people who are going, oh yeah, this will work, because that's what happens. You have somebody who has a lot of money, and Oscar's just the face of, let's face it, Oscar's the face of this, first of all. So somebody goes, hey, we've got this idea, and Oscar goes, great, let's do it. Because Oscar's not really spending his money. He has investors that say, hey, we have this idea and we want to push it, and we want you to go out there and be the face and push it. I mean, I'm sure Oscar has money in it too, and so he's invested in it as well, obviously. But when it comes right down to it, there are a lot of people trying to make money on this, and we've seen this a million times. And so, but
here's what I would caution Oscar or anybody else coming into the business, especially if you don't want to do regional MMA. Like if you want to do a South LA show, I'm sure you can get a lot of fighters in the area and stuff, and feed people into bigger shows and stuff. And that's
absolutely
kind of
make money on that.
I question whether they're going to have the dedication to do that. But if you look at what the UFC did, the UFC, when they went from Meyerowitz to Zuffa, the UFC set about a path of escalating the number of shows that were done, getting more shows into a calendar year. They did that kind of quickly, getting to where they are now, where you're basically at weekly shows and stuff like that. But that was the number one thing, and they invested in that, and are supposedly, the rumors say $30 to $40 million in the hole of investment. Now, Oscar's got 30 or 40 million, but is he willing to see it all go? Because that's the model that worked, is get 30, 40 million in the hole, and by then you've invested enough that you're actually got the traction. Before that, you're just a flash in the pan. Right? That's what they proved. So unless you're willing to take the one model that works, what are you going to do? Follow Affliction's model? Follow Bodog's model? You can't follow those models. Follow Jeff Osborne's model. With all respect to Jeff, if you wanted to operate in Indiana or on a regional market, follow his model. It's a great model.
Yeah.
But if you want to compete,
follow
with
the cage rage model. I can make you $200,000 a year. In cash, and I can do that all day long. But do you want to kill yourself to do it?
At the highest level. So that's what makes the Oscar Tito effort cringeworthy. Is that it's just a complete disconnect, and really ahead. They don't have a lot of MMA people, but that's why if I tell them this is what's going to take 2 years, $40 million, start investing now, and at the end there's a $1 billion pie that you're splitting up. I don't think they got the balls to put the $40 million in. Not the way Zuffa did and Dana did, and that's why they are where they are. You know,
You know,
they had it and they did it.
Look. Let's just say this on this part of the podcast. If you want to start a real MMA show where you want to come out and you want to be a heavy hitter and you want to compete with, even if you just want to compete with Bellator and you want to knock Bellator out of their spot, because nobody's going to knock the UFC out of the UFC spot. Not right now. That's not going to happen. I mean, it could, but man, you'd have to have a huge well behind you. And even then, I don't think it's going to happen. I think you're doing the same thing that people try to knock out the NFL are going to do. They're so branded that the UFC is MMA. MMA is not MMA, it's the UFC. So, having said that, if you want to come in and be second to the UFC instead of Bellator being the UFC, then the way you do it is to come in and you buy up every single fighter by paying them very, very handsomely and put them on 6-fight contracts where they can get great experience, get TV experience at a lower level, and get some kind of spike deal or something like that. Do 1 or 2 pay-per-views a year of your best top super talent, and then when you're done, move them on to the UFC and make a deal with the UFC where you go, look, we're your farm market. I don't see it working any other way. I think that could work, and I think the UFC would work with you, and in that case, you would have the UFC behind you instead of fighting you. Other than that, I don't see it working any other way. And maybe I'm wrong about that too. I don't know. What do you think?
Look, I think the bottom line to me here is Oscar's intent is to operate at a high level here. He don't want to do regional shows or anything like that. He wants to operate at a high level of MMA, and I think the UFC's got a good position in the business, as you illustrated. But more than that, I think, and this isn't exactly, Dana's still there. It's not Zuffa anymore. But at least if they continue to operate the same way, you've got an aggressive enemy. If they ever really feel threatened, you're going to have an aggressive enemy. Oh. And, what happens if you've got, like Bellator, 3 or 4 shows that are planned there, and, on your calendar, and the UFC says, all right, they want to really up the game a little bit. Let's add 15 shows to our calendar and sign up more people. And, oh, by the way, run a show Friday night before their Saturday night shows in the same town every time.
Yep.
Aggressive, angry, stuff like that. Or, it becomes really hard to operate like normal. Right now, they're not in that state because the UFC doesn't see any real threat.
Yep.
So I think if Golden Boy intended to be a real threat, they got a lot of work to do. They haven't even come onto the UFC's radar as a threat. Oscar, in his response to Dana, did say, Dana kind of got, the door slammed shut in his face by boxing, and he didn't do, hasn't really done anything in boxing yet. The work with Mayweather and McGregor at the end of the day is now, 15 months ago in the calendar year, so no one really cares about that anymore. He hasn't done anything in boxing. And Golden Boy pointed that out. So the crossover is going to be rough for whoever goes.
Yeah.
If the Zuffa went $40 million in, the next guy may have to go $80 million in. And maybe that kind of game you're playing. But, at the end of the day, there's an investor. Guys sat around and they developed, a beautiful ad campaign and bottles and for ball wash. So, people are fooling his money are parted, all the time, so
you just can't get away from ball wash, man.
But you could go on CNN, you could go on Bleacher Report. I was just goofing around and I was reading news from Nigeria on a Nigerian news website, and there's a ball wash banner. So these guys are spending advertising money. This guy's a millionaire, pissing his money away. Does he really think, are you going to buy ball? Did you buy ball wash? If I had a list of friends of mine who would buy ball wash, you'd be on that list, Chad. Did you buy ball wash?
Well, I'm metrosexual.
That's what I'm saying.
No, I would not buy ball wash. You know why? Because my balls are shorn so closely that I don't need ball wash.
I understand, but we're getting off the subject. But my point in bringing ball wash up is that fool and his money are parted easily at times, right?
Yes,
So my
I get it. Yeah, I get it.
In order to really compete with the UFC, Oscar's got to rethink the strategy and really, put a plan in place and follow the plan, whatever it may be. If it's, snipe and take, guys under contract. I think what the UFC's open for, what they're most scared of, is someone who can face them off for the next 5 to 8 years, where fighters are actually saying, I'm going to let my contract run out.
Yeah.
I'd like to be.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. The UFC, they have an awful lot of fighters that are on contract that they just can't get fights for. And so they're setting, and at some point these fighters are going to have to be saying, hey, you have to pay me, you have to fight me, you have to figure out how to use me, or you've got to let me go. And the UFC's contracts are staunchly in favor of the UFC because these guys have never had any other place to go. And so what this does do, if they stay in the game, and if Bellator stays in the game and continues, and then let's just imagine that if one other company comes in now you've got a whole different bracket happening, because now you've got a four-way split where fighters have a real option. That fucks the UFC's whole game up, because now the UFC doesn't have a monopoly on things, and that would change things. But if Oscar and the Golden Boy Productions thing, if they can stick around and say, look, if they can really do what Tito says they're going to do, we're going to offer fighters real money, we're going to offer them benefits and real pay, and we're really going to take care of you. If they can do that, which I don't see them being able to do it, especially on Chuck Hole and Cheeto fights, but if they can really do it, then okay, and maybe that was just a launch. Maybe that was just a way for them to get, because look, we're still talking about it, even though it was terrible. Maybe it was nothing more than a gimmick for people just to talk about it.
Golden Boy's next move into MMA is going to be highly scrutinized if it even happens. And that's the thing. It's like you really want to see what the next step is, how serious they were. We'll find out, because if the next step is, and I'm going to just toss names out there because I know Matt's not capable, but like Matt Hughes against Hoist Gracie rematch, I'm turning it off. Click. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's just horrible. I don't even want to talk about something like that. But yeah, I get it. I get what you're saying. And okay, so one last thing, and then let's wrap this up.
Me?
But just for the hell of it, okay? And we should do a full podcast on this at some point. But just one last thing, just for the hell of it. If you could pick one, Legends fight that was actually a real fight that you could have, that is sort of an available fight, maybe kind of a guy who's retired, not necessarily with the UFC, or could somehow bargain, leverage, or otherwise legally get out of their contract if they're in it. Pick two guys that you would have fight. If there was a guy, because look, there are a lot of fighters out there who aren't done, who they could have picked and who could have been a great fight. Tell me two fighters they should have taken that are available, or that at least available is not the right word. Let's say the attorneys could go in, get them out of their contract, or Golden Boy could say, look, Dana, we want to buy this contract out. I don't care if it's $20 million or whatever it is. We want to buy the contract out. And they get two guys that the UFC are no longer using. They can't utilize them. They don't want them, whatever it is. Tell me two guys that you would have put in that spot that would have worked instead. And that would have worked. That have draw, that have the fitness still, that are competitive, and it would have been a great fight.
Like to me, you're talking about a tall order when you're going to try to do something that puts you on the map all at once. I think what you're looking at when you get to face the UFC is, and even if you have a TV contract and you're now number 3 behind Bellator or whatever, unless it's like one FC that now has like an international contract or something, anybody who gets just a TV contract, you're still looking at 4 to 5 years before people even recognize.
I'm just playing here. Just fantasize with me a little bit. Just throw one out there. One fight.
I'm
You're a goddamn matchmaker, dude. You're the best matchmaker on the planet. Give me one fucking fight. Matchmaker. You haven't done it in years. Matchmake.
With their money, and they wanted to do a real big fight.
Unlimited funds.
All right. I mean, the bottom line is Ben Askren was recently available. One FC didn't have fights for him, and they could have been approached. They were approached, obviously, with the UFC. They came to a deal. But while Askren was available, I would have tried to get Askren, and then test the waters for the UFC if I had to deal with them. But I'm not sure that he's not free or won't be free in a short term, and that's St. Pierre. And then you've kind of got a flashy fight that is also a legitimate fight that, St. Pierre counts as the legend, but doesn't bring the the downside of a wasted legend like Tito and Chuck were. So,
there is a real fight they could have done, and there are fighters out there, right? There are fighters like that, right? They're out there.
The bottom line is matchmaking and everything around there. Anybody can say this guy can fight that guy. The business end of it is your Rolodex and your ability to be able to make deals.
Definitely.
If they were willing to try to make a deal, so let's say Askren was available, but the bottom line is one doesn't have a lot of options for him, and they could be approached, and for very low money or for some type of exchange, Askren would have been made available for that fight. He could have stayed with one afterwards or whatever, but he would have been made available for that fight. That would have been, until the UFC deal came along and there was really no other options, that would have been a no-brainer, and that's easy, right? The hard part would have been the St. Pierre part. And St. Pierre would do it. He's shown himself to be independent enough from the UFC for that type of thing. But you're talking about if the UFC still has some type of link to him by contract, you might have to have the UFC do it. Now, I'm not sure if you cut the UFC in and somehow, I'm not sure that fight doesn't benefit the UFC to get rid of St. Pierre's contract if they can. It lets him fight. It puts him in a good position. That fight may scare them enough because it's a legit fight that they wouldn't let anyone play with it. You know what I mean?
Great.
But there's one possibility.
Hey, so an upcoming podcast we've got to do is we have to talk about who the UFC's competition is, who the UFC's competition is going to be, who they were, all that good stuff. And does it benefit the UFC to have competition? For example, at one time when I was still promoting, I made my own competition by having another promotion. So I built another promotion that no one knew was my promotion, and I had 2 promotions going at the same time. Had it not been for the fact that it was so much work, I would have kept it going, because having my own competition benefited me greatly. They talked shit about me. I talked shit about them. I had all kinds of rivalries going. It was great. And the UFC might do something like that. I said when the UFC bought Pride out that the dumbest thing they ever did was told people they bought Pride out. The second dumbest thing they ever did was to shut Pride down. They should have had them continue to go, acted like they never knew anything about each other, and then every New Year's Eve had a face-off between the two. Once in Japan, once in the U.S., or at the same time, something like that. But anyway, that's another story. Hey, it's been a podcast. So
it's bittersweet.
I'm glad it's over. We are still working on getting the videos loaded. So subscribe while you can, because once we get all this stuff put up, we will be obligated to charge some fee for subscriptions. So get your subscription while you can, because it's still free right now. Press the little red button right down there on YouTube. You can contact me, Chadillac, Chadillac, at thecageragepodcast.com, Miguel at thecageragepodcast.com, on Facebook and all that good stuff. You know all that bullshit. Anything before we go, Miguel?
Yeah, Chuck and Tito. Tito retired. Chuck, said he'd have to think about it. I think he was just being careful. But let me just put it this way to you as a fitting end to the podcast. The boxing commissions and the sport in general should tell Chuck thanks but no thanks, and you can't fight anymore. It should be taken out of his hands in some way, shape, or form. I don't want him to decide whether he'll do it again or not. I saw enough. So hopefully we're not subject to a return of Chuck.
Namaste.
That's rare, nigga. Woo! Ric Flair, nigga. Woo! The power's in my head, nigga. Woo! I get this beat the chair, nigga. So hard.
See how that turns out. See how that turns out. See how that turns out. See how that turns out.